How are you doing? I definitely got him. Oh, yeah, I got attacked.
I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. We've got a great crowd this morning. Really appreciate all of you guys coming in today. The Texas Government Code permits this Board of Trustees to meet in a closed executive session for the following reasons, among others: to consult with the college district's attorneys on matters deemed privileged by the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct, or Government Code 551.071, to deliberate regarding real property under 551.072, a prospective gift under 551.073, certain personnel matters under 551.074, security devices or security audits under 551.076, and economic development negotiations under 551.087, and security assessments or deployments relating to information resources technology under 551.089. If the board meets in closed session, we will announce the particular section under which we will be doing so prior to initiating the closed portion of the meeting. Now I will bring our to our invocation and pledge. Today we've got two students. Josh Green, a first-year communications major from San Antonio, is going to do our invocation, and Daphne Cantu, a second-year education major from Edinburgh, is going to do our pledge.
We're good to go. All right. Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this board meeting. Be with the Board of Trustees in their deliberations and help them to be wise in the decisions they make for the good of this institution, its students, faculty, and staff. I pray that we put our trust and confidence in their leadership. Please grant us the humility to seek your will in ways that we do and say. Lord, we ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thanks, guys. We really appreciate you guys being here with us today. Okay, it doesn't appear that anyone has signed up for public comment, so we will move on to the report section of our meeting. The first report is going to be the Chancellor's Administrative Report.
Good morning, trustees and everyone in the audience. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you here. Trustees, regarding the Leroy Dryer Field, the material lead times and the supply chain issues remain a concern, and we continue to collaborate with the construction managers at risk on each of our projects to lessen their impacts. At Leroy Dryer Field, rooftop HVAC units required to cool the new locker room have been delayed and are scheduled to ship later this month in October. To expedite completion of this project, temporary rooftop units have been installed, and when the final units arrive, the facilities department and construction manager at risk will complete the final HVAC installation. And then the installation of the brick masonry, interior and exterior doors, and the interior glass have begun. The coaches' locker room finishes are in progress, and the office furniture has been installed. The concessions area finishes are complete, and the appliances and the equipment soon will be installed. And this project, trustees, still is scheduled for completion in November. Regarding arts, kinesiology, and agriculture division, trustees, we are joined today by Debbie Vavra, academic dean for the Division of Arts, Kinesiology, and Agriculture. This division includes Blinn's agricultural sciences, architecture, arts, communication studies, construction science, graphic design and photography, health and kinesiology, music and theater arts programs. Together, they offer Blinn students 14 degree certificates and occupational skills awards, as well as a wide range of extracurricular activities, including the Ag Club, band, choir, livestock judging, speech and debate, and theater. At this time, I would like to invite Debbie Vavra, Dean of Arts, Kinesiology, and Agriculture, to introduce the faculty and staff who have joined her today and to share more information about this division's many initiatives. Dean Vavra.
Good morning, Chancellor Hensley, Chair Colcourse, members of the board. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak about one of my most favorite things, the Arts, Kinesiology, and Agriculture Division. Before I get too far into things, I wanted to give you a little bit of history about our division. When I first came to Blinn College 28 years ago, I was only 10. And the division that we currently have now was known as the Brenham Fine Arts Division and the Bryan Fine Arts Division. And the two operated very separately. And once we went through our reorganization several years ago, the two were merged into one and became known as the Visual and Performing Arts Division. Shortly after that, Kinesiology was added to the division and we became known as Visual Performing Arts and Kinesiology, or VPAC. That division existed for several years, and then about a year and a half ago, agriculture was moved to our division, and we are now known as Arts, Kinesiology, and Agriculture, or AKA. So if you're playing Wheel of Fortune or Scrabble, we are your people. We can give you a consonant, a vowel, whatever you need, because our acronym has changed so many times. But we are a very diverse division. As Dr. Hensley said, we have 9 different programs. And when you first look at those programs, you might think it's an odd assortment, but they complement each other very well. And I believe we are an excellent division for having this diversity. And we are very different than when I obviously first came here 28 years ago. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce a group of people that I think is just the best of the best, and that's our leadership team in AKA. And so I'd like to have them stand and be recognized. First of all, the glue that holds the agriculture department together is Ms. Roxanne Marburger. She's our administrative assistant for agriculture. We have Craig Jeffrey, who's assistant dean and professor of architecture. We have Dr. Shelley Peacock, who's assistant dean and professor of health and kinesiology. We have Dr. Blinn Binky, who is an assistant dean and professor of agriculture. And then we have our department heads. We have Dr. Keith Sylvester, who's department head for visual arts and professor of architecture. We have Todd Quinlan, who's department head for performing arts and professor of music. And then we have Dr. Nathan Kruger, who's department head for agriculture and professor of agriculture. We have Jill Stewart, who is our instrumental music coordinator and professor of music. And then we have Tim Weaver, who could not join us. He's at a conference today, but he is our coordinator for art and visual communication. And so this group of people, sorry, I knew I was going to forget somebody. Yeah, I forgot my own teaching field. So we have Clay Redding, who is our department head for communication studies and professor of communication studies. So sorry about that. I knew I was going to forget somebody. But this is an awesome group of people. You can see they clean up very well, very handsome, beautiful people. And these people work long weekends, long hours in the evenings. Theirs is not an 8 to 5 job by any stretch of the imagination. I have the greatest respect and affection for them, and we could not do all that we do in AKA without this wonderful group of people. So it's an honor to work with them. So thank you. And I'm gonna kind of pull out my old teacher voice, and I'm gonna get Mr. Wells first. Let's not open our packets just yet. Okay. You're that student, aren't you? No. I am too. So if you'll wait and not open that folder until we get towards the end, and then we'll look and see what's in there for you. Okay. All right, so To move on to some more specifics about the division, I thought it would be important for you to know about our culture in AKA. We have a culture of excellence. We try to have very high standards for all of our events and activities for our faculty, staff, and students. And to give you an example of this, if you look at the people who have won the Teaching Excellence Award for the past several years, we will often have at least one or two faculty members from AKA who are receiving that award. This year we had 2 people. The same is true for the NYSIDE Awards of Excellence. We typically have a member of AKA who's a recipient of that award. We also have members of faculty and our leadership team who work at convocation, giving presentations, work on various committees. And right now we have Dr. Shelley Peacock, who is president of our Division Leadership Council. We also have Todd Quinlan, who's chair of the Curriculum Committee. Those are 2 extremely important committees at the college. And we also have Clay Redding, who is our QEP director for the college. So we are very active, not only in the division, but outside the division across the college district. And we are also very student-centered. We have several clubs that are housed in our division, as Dr. Hensley was saying. And then we also have 4 scholarship groups of students who are housed in the division. And that takes a lot of extra oversight, responsibility, years off of our life sometimes. But we have the band, we have the choir, livestock judging, and then our theater students. And we are so proud of all that they have accomplished. We try to be very visible. You may have seen our artwork and architecture work displayed in the library, student center, H building in Bryan, classroom building here. We try to really promote our students because we are so very proud of the work that they are doing. And we also try to have a very strong presence in social media. We have 2 drones in our division that we fly, and we get footage from our various events and then post the pictures and footage out on social media. And we try to have a posting at least once a week for our various programs. And we are very committed to community outreach, not only helping our community, but bringing community members onto campus. So 2 examples of that are in the spring, our kinesiology students help with the Hospice of Brazos Valley Gala. They help in the planning and volunteering for that event, and they've been doing that for several years. And we also have community members, and especially K through 12 students, who come onto our campus to see our play productions. This about a week and a half ago, when we had the production of Houdini, we had 300 students who came to campus. Now, that is down from pre-COVID days when it was not unusual for us to have 1,100 K through 12 students who would come into the O'Donnell Center or over to our black box in Bryan. So we're very much committed to community outreach. Shared resources. You probably will not meet a more competitive group of people than AKA, but we will share. And so we have some really fun toys, a laser cutter, 3D printer, those types of things. And we're always willing to share our resources, our knowledge, our experience, and our help with others. And that's something that Dr. Busicki began when he was the dean for the division, and that's something we feel is very important to continue. Relationships. This is what's most important to me. I try to tell people often that you may not like every minute or maybe every day that you come to work at Blinn College, but I want you to have more days that you do like than not. And so it's very important that we take care of one another and be there for one another and show up for one another. And that's something that we try to pass on to our students. We want them to know the material, but we want them to leave here a better person. And that's going to help the history moving forward of Blinn College if we would build those relationships. And then lastly, we were always willing to go the extra mile. I can't tell you how many parade floats that we have built, events that we have volunteered for, events that we provided music for. So we're always willing to go the extra mile. And so I think all those things build a very, very strong culture for our division. So as Dr. Hensley said, we do have 14 degrees in our division. Most of those are AS or AA degrees. And then in graphic design, we have an AAS, a level 1 certificate, and then 2 OSA degrees. And we also do have 2 degrees in architecture and then in music that have a field of study. The field of study in this case is 36 hours in their concentration, be it music or architecture. And then they have 24 hours of the core. So those students will leave here and they will not be core complete, but they will have an AA, and then they'll finish their core when they get over to the university and then transfer those hours back in most cases, and then be core complete. We do have several transfer agreements that are noted up here. Texas A&M, University International, Texas Tech, Texas A&M. We recently signed with the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, a transfer agreement about 1.5 years ago. And then we also have several agreements in the works. And if you've ever worked on one of these, you know, it's kind of like becoming a professional nag, because people get really excited and they work on it, and then it kind of goes radio silent on your email, and then they get re-enthused. And so sometimes it takes a while to get these accomplished. And we were very excited about 1.5 weeks ago when we were contacted by Sam Houston. We had been trying to get an agreement with them for theater and hadn't been very successful. And all of a sudden they call us up, and now we have our classes worked out. So we have a seamless transfer over there. We also have some neat information to tell our theater students that will help them as they transfer into theater. And so we're very excited about that. Now, with the ones that are in the works, one thing that we really want to do is to have some field trips to these different institutions. Last spring, Dr. Kruger and Dr. Binky and I toured Prairie View A&M's agriculture facility, and it was amazing. And then in the summer, they came and toured the Rankin facility. And so what we would like to do is take our students to tour that facility. And this is true of all the different institutions on that list, because students may not know anything about that institution. They may not know what they have to offer. And so if we physically take them there on a field trip, they get to meet the faculty, they learn more about the program, and then more than likely, hopefully they will transfer to that institution. So we're kind of opening their eyes to some additional opportunities. We also want to have faculty from these other institutions come and give master classes and be guest lecturers, speakers in our classes. And we've already done that with the University of Texas at San Antonio. We had some music faculty who came and very graciously gave 2 wonderful master classes for our music students. And so that's where we are with our university partners. Is something that we continue to work on to build those relationships with them so we can help our students have that seamless transfer. Next, I want to let you know about our courses in the core curriculum, because we're kind of heading into an enrollment section I'm going to talk about. Our bread and butter, for the most part, is our creative arts courses. For a student in the core, they only need 1 creative arts class, so 3 credit hours. And we have 13 courses in architecture, arts, drama, and music that fit those 3 hours. So you can see that there's a lot of competition for those 3 hours. And so sometimes they kind of what we call cannibalize one another because there are so many opportunities for just the 3 hours. We also are in the component area option. And the component area option itself is worth 6 credit hours. We have 4 of those. And we have speech, which is 3 credit hours. And then kinesiology 1164, which is a 1 credit hour class. Then we also do have some classes in the other foundation areas of the core. So we have an agriculture class, ag economics, and then a speech 1318, which is interpersonal communication in the social and behavioral sciences area. And then in life and physical sciences, we've got the horticulture class. Our majors, again, we've got this diverse group of people. Here are how our majors kind of pan out. Our 4 top majors are kinesiology at 1,468, agriculture, we've got 981, And then construction science at 481 and communication studies at 420. And then the rest of those are kind of dispersed from lower up to medium level. Keep in mind that these 4 areas are kind of indicative of what's going on in society. Agriculture, very important because of our food issues, climate, construction science with all the building that's going on. Kinesiology is a feeder to multiple fields, coaching, nursing, occupational therapy, etc. So we're going to have a lot of students who are those majors. So this is how we kind of pan out in terms of our majors. Enrollment. With enrollment, this is duplicated enrollment. And so we have, for the division, we have 9,015 students as of yesterday compared to fall of 2021, which we had 869. And so we're up about 12%. So that's 946 seats here. And so keep in mind that's duplicated. So those students might be in multiple courses in the division, but that is a substantial growth for us. Our numbers were hurt dramatically during COVID because it wasn't a whole lot of fun to be in, especially the performing arts. If you're not aware, our choir students were housed over in the rock gym. They had to stand 8 feet apart. They had a mask on, a face shield, and they were in a gym 8 feet apart from the next singer. If you know anything about choir, it's important that they be able to hear one another, and that was very difficult. And so we are very happy that our enrollment is going back in the direction that it needs to go. So moving on to something that's heavily related to enrollment, and that's something I called RRC. And this is something I started when I first became dean. And this is recruit, retain, and complete. I don't know about you, but when I have to make goals for my performance evaluation, those give me difficulty because I have to look back and go, what percentage did I say that I was going to do something? And so I wanted something that I could just articulate easily and that the rest of our division could articulate easily. So we train our faculty and staff to say that in AKA, we recruit, we retain, and complete. And so every event that we look at, we're thinking, how can we recruit? How can we retain the student? How can we complete them, either get them transferred or get them graduated? And so I have some examples of just a few things that we have done thus far to help in those areas, just so you can get a little idea. So in terms of recruitment, this fall we had the Buccaneer Band experience. That's where we invited high school students. We ended up having about 150 students who came to campus. They were instructed by our music faculty. And then later that evening, they performed, and it was an awesome program with our Buccaneer Band. And so now we have 150 students who are human billboards throughout our communities because they have that Buccaneer Band experience for Blinn College t-shirt that they're wearing everywhere. We had the livestock judging camp. We had 2 camps. We have one for the younger students and one for the high school students. And we had 250 campers this year. Those represented 12 states. So imagine students from 12 states came to Brenham, Texas to participate in this judging camp. So huge recruiting opportunity. And we also just participated in the Texas Educational Theater Association recruitment booth. This is a big convention for theater students, and we had a booth there. And then again, we have a strong social media presence, and then we do a lot of high school visits. So recently we have about 9 high school visits on the books with more in the works. And so what I'd like to emphasize is, yes, when we go out and recruit, we're trying to get people in music or theater or architecture, but we are also recruiting for all the other divisions, because guess what? That architecture student or that music student is going to probably take an English class, a math class, a developmental class, a science class. So we are working very hard, not only for us, but for all of the other divisions and for the college, because they will buy books. They will probably live in on-campus housing. They will have a meal plan. And so that's something that we take very seriously is our recruiting efforts. Now, in terms of retaining students, if you look at the research, one of the most important things to retain a student is to get them to have connection, to have a community. And so that's what we try to do. For example, we have Fitness Fridays going on for our kinesiology majors. And so every Friday in the gym in Bryan, we have an instructor who is taking them through various aspects of weightlifting and health and fitness for kinesiology. Students who are not on that campus can Zoom, or basically anybody could, to participate in that. We also have Sigma Chi Eta Honor Society. That's a new honor society for our communication studies students. We also have a service learning project going on with our speech students at the Brenham State Supported Living Center. So again, getting them actively involved with one another. We have Ag Club. We've reintroduced that. And we had a huge showing for our Ag Club meeting that we just had. And then those same students, as well as our livestock judging team, will assist with the livestock judging camp. So those students stay during their summer and come back and work for free to help administer the livestock judging camp. Then we also provide a place for students to belong with our various events and activities. It's not unusual. If you go over to theater, you'll always see a lot of students in Mr. Neese's office. That gives them a place to be, a group to belong to, and we think that's very important in retaining students. And then lastly, some things that we're doing to help complete students. We do have majors advising days where we have free food, and then we get the students to come, and we will have a group of advisors for all our different areas, and then we will also help them register after they are advised. We also do 45+ hour checks. Dr. Peacock is our guru for this. She will run a report and find out which students have 45 or more hours, and is there any way we can get them graduated? Can we notify them, hey, you could graduate, or you're about to graduate? Many times they don't know. And we have guest speakers in various fields to let them know how to get a good job, what a good job is like, what they're going to be doing. And we try to take field trips to get them more in tune with the field that they're going into to these four-year institutions. And then lastly, we have our faculty and leadership team involvement and tracking. And we pretty much keep tabs on and maybe sometimes nag these students a lot. You've got to get your registered. You've got to do this. You've got to do that, because we want them to be successful when they leave here, either as a transfer or as a graduate. All right, looking ahead with AKA, here's some things that are coming up that all of us can take part in, but also the community, going back to that community outreach. And we have Health and Kinesiology's cardio program. This is built around all the holidays where you can do a virtual run. Right now we have, is it Trick or Trot? Yeah, Trick or Trot that you can be a part of. And we have the Performing Arts Series at the O'Donnell. Our next show is November 4th with the Pop Rock Orchestra. And then we have 2 holiday productions coming up with our theater companies. We have Fellow Passengers with our Blinn Bryan Theater Group, and then the day before Christmas with our Brenham Theater Group. And the day before Christmas is going to be a faculty staff showcase. So Brad Neese is going to be Jack Frost. Kevin Patrick is growing out his beard so he can be Santa. Jennifer Patrick, who is our part-time faculty member and costume designer, is directing the show, and I am Mrs. Claus. So we're having a good time doing that. Yeah, don't clap until you hear me sing. It may not be pretty. Yeah. We also have one of my favorite events, and that's the Sound of the Season concert. This is a joint concert with our choir and Wind Symphony, and this takes place at Festival Hill. So this happens December, and it gets you in the Christmas or holiday mood. And it's a beautiful, beautiful concert. And the most important part of that is it gives our students an opportunity to perform in a wonderful venue. So they are always very excited about that. In the spring, we'll have our visual arts show, and we'll have our Ag Mech show, which brings lots of students and families to our campus. We'll have a speech showcase. And then at the end of every semester, we have multiple vocal recitals and concerts, usually for about 2 weeks at the end of every semester. And then as well as our instrumental concerts. So we have a lot going on, and we hope that you will take part in that. And again, we're trying to build those community ties so we can have goodwill for the college as well. So at this point, if you will go ahead and open up your folder, I'll tell you about that. So my daughter plays volleyball and dance, and so I'm always going to some hotel or resort for that. And it's always interesting that when we get there and check in, they will have some kind of tablet, and then they circle, you know, you're here and you need to go here, and this is going to cost this or whatever. And I'm like, we need a tablet for AKA, because we go out and we have all these brochures that would slide everywhere, look messy, they're hard to carry around. So Rich Bray and his team help us get these sheets. We call them the sheets lovingly. And so we have a sheet for each of our 9 programs that gives you a snapshot about the program that lets you know in case you're interested in that program. But it also helps our faculty and leadership team who may not be over that program. If they're out advising, it helps them to be more familiar and answer some questions that students and parents may have. And so we can advise them on here. It has their classes. We can flip it over and advise them for their entire semester. And so we just rip it off. And so that will give you some background on all of our different programs in case you forget everything that I've said today. And so we're really proud of these, and they took a lot of effort on the part of Rich Bray and Darla Arter. And so we are very appreciative to marketing. They make us look so good. And I know that we give them a lot of grief sometimes with all the events that they have to build pieces for. So thank you for that. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and close, but I do want to thank Dr. Hensley for her continued support of our programs and all of you, but especially to our former Dean, Dr. Busicki. Thank you so much for allowing me to be the Dean of this division. It's a great honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Bava. That was an excellent presentation, and we thoroughly enjoyed it. And I encourage all of our trustees to go to many of these wonderful events. They are professional in every respect, and you'll leave with a smile on your face, I know for sure.
Could I ask a question about that?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Lori, would you make sure that you made the board aware of whenever an event is taking place so that we can possibly put it on our calendar? Thank you.
Oh, you'll love that. Your calendar is immediately going to populate.
You may regret that. No.
Not just with AKA, but you can take everything that she's talked about and apply it to every division within the college with activities and speakers and events to attend. So I often say you can never be bored at Blinn College. It's just joyful and so many wonderful things to attend every moment of the day. With that, I wonder, we were going to take one picture, but I'm wondering if maybe we could take 2. We have some students who were recently honored, Dean Vavra, and I think we wanted to recognize them, about 8 of them or so. And I'd suggest maybe we come forward and you tell us from the mic who they are and what their awards are, and then we'll take a photo. And then this is a wonderful moment to capture most of our faculty from the AKA division together. So I'm wondering if we could take a separate picture with our faculty, and then you'll have more for the next brochures or the sheets.
That would be lovely. That would be lovely.
All right. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask our theater director, Brad Neese, to come up and tell you about the competition that they just participated in and won some great awards, as well as introduce the students.
Thank you for this opportunity for us to address the board. I am joined today by our technical theater arts director, Kevin Patrick, who without him, our program would not be what it is. Because of him, our facility keeps from becoming antiquated, and he has just done incredible work as far as training students and also advising them and getting them ready that way. I am also joined by Alyssa Hale. Alyssa Hale was winner of a couple of awards. She won the Meritorious Award, the KCACTF, had to think a second, so many anagrams. KCACTF Meritorious Award for stage management as well as for sound design. And she is also joined by by Samantha Nolan. Samantha she was our assistant stage manager, so she also received an award for stage management as well as sound design. And then last but not least, we have got Josiah Fernandez. Josiah played one of the leading roles in the show. He played Marco Bone, who served as sort of a narrator, and he received an Irene Ryan nomination, which is an acting award that the Kennedy Center American College Theater Festival will give. And at this time, Alyssa and Josiah are going to pass around flyers because we have got flyers for our theater season as well as our performing arts season that we would love to have each and every person come to, and it has all the dates and the times that way. While they're doing that, very quickly, I just wanted to tell you about this play and about KCACTF. This stands for the Kennedy Center American College Theater Festival. It is a national theater festival that incorporates community colleges as well as four-year colleges and universities. What this does, not only does it get our name out there, but it will also give the students opportunity for awards like the ones that you saw, like ones I just introduced. This play that we did, Houdini, was written by a poet. She started writing it back in the 1950s, and she completed it in the 1970s. And in 1973, it was produced in Massachusetts. I believe it was Boston, Massachusetts, is where they produced it, and they were going to send it to New York. It was going to go to Broadway. Well, then the project just fell apart, and nothing ever happened, and nobody knows really what happened, except probably one person. Christopher Walken was the one, a very young Christopher Walken played the part of Houdini in that production in 1973. But it fell apart, didn't have anything, and for years just you didn't hear anything about this particular version of Houdini. Then around 2000, someone got to digging through a box and they found this script that Muriel Rukeyser had written. That's the poet. And as she had the script, and they said, this needs to be published. The publishing company published it. And in around 2002 is when they published, 2002, 2003, and then it fell into obscurity again. It was published, but nobody was doing it. So when I read it and decided, oh, we're going to do this, I also found out there was another university in Michigan, Eastern Michigan State University, was going to do a staged reading of it because their library had opened up a section for Muriel Rukeyser's work. So when we started putting this show together, we started organizing it, and I checked with the publishing company and I said, are we the second people to actually produce a full production of it with a set and costumes, lights, everything? Are the second people to do that? And they said, gee, we don't know. We're going to hand you over to the lady that owns the rights to the play, the woman that actually owns the play. Well, she was thrilled to hear from us, and she told us, yes, Blinn College was the second theater company here on this campus, was the second theater company to produce this work as a full work, not just as a staged reading, but with costumes, sets, lighting, props, and everything. And this lady is just absolutely thrilled. She said, this is putting this play back on the map, and this is what Muriel Rukeyser would have wanted. And she even sent me an email yesterday and said, thank you so much for your work. She said, please know that Muriel's looking down on you and smiling. So, because she passed away in the 1980s. So anyway, but that is, I think that's just terrific that we're part of that history of this place. So I wanted to tell you all about that. And we're going to excuse ourselves, if you don't mind, because everyone got a flyer, right? Okay, we're going to excuse ourselves because we're working on the day before Christmas and we've got to get to work.
Brad, before you go, we want to take a picture.
Absolutely.
All right. But before we do that, may I ask the trustees, anybody have any comments or questions?
Yeah, I was actually at the performance, and we truly have some very gifted young people. So I echo what our chair said. If you ever have the opportunity to come and support the young people that work tremendously hard, from the performance side to the sets, to the sounds, to the lights. So I encourage you to try to come and support them.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your kind words. Yes.
We are all so very proud of you, and it's wonderful to see everybody around. And going back a little bit to what we had with Ms. Vavra, is that we see so many students around. And I have to say that the students that were represented at the fair and doing so many jobs down there are so appreciated. It was wonderful to see so many students out in our community.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
With that, let's take two sets of photos, please. Let's start with our students first and Dean Vavra, and then we'll do a second photo with our fabulous faculty and staff from AKA.
Oh. No, I think we're in good shape. And I'll count to 3, and 1, 2, 3, and just one more time. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. For this one, we might. All right, and I'll count to 3, and 1, 2, 3, and just one more time. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. It's good to see you. Look forward to seeing you. A whole bunch of our. Take care.
So trustees, thank you again for the time allocated to showcase another one of the wonderful divisions within Blinn College. I'm sure you can see what wonderful talent and professionalism we have within the ranks of Blinn College. It's a pleasure to have them join us today, and I encourage you, if you can, to go to their productions, and they so support it. With this, trustees, it ends the Chancellor's report, and thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Chancellor. We're going to move on to item B under 4 and reports, presentation of financial statement package for period ended September 30th, 2022. And I believe Mr. Cervantes will take this.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Hensley, members of the board. This will take us to the month of September, which is the first month of the fiscal year, which means we're 8% of the way through just starting of the new year. Our revenue through September is a little bit over $13 million. Our expenses are at $9.9 million and our net $3.1 million. Just as a reminder, before I get too much into this, when we are experiencing the September, the early months of the fiscal year, there's so many anomalies out there, the timing issues, it really is hard to compare. So until we get to either November or December is really when we'll start taking a hard look at some of, but we know a little bit, and I'll try to point some of those out as I go through it. So when we compare to last year, our revenue is, this year is 13 million. We had a little bit over $12 million, which means a change last year, which means a change of 934,000. So we are up compared to last year on revenue. Our expenditures are also up. We had 9.9 this year and we had 8.8 last year. $1 million, a little bit over $1 million in change. And some of that is, a big part of that is timing. So I see a lot of large increases, percentages, and it does get my attention, but it's too early to say. Our net change in fund balance, $3.1 million this year compared to the 3.3 last year. So it's $124,000 less. We did have one HERF transaction in September of last year for about $151,000. What you're going to see, Mr. Chairman, and this is going to be throughout the fiscal year. Last year, we received a total of $17 million of HERF money. You're not going to have any of that in the comparisons for this year, but we'll point it out. This is one of the anomalies. The percentages are pretty close compared to last year, but if you look at interest, that is actually a 800% increase. And yes, the interest rates have gone up, but we're not going to be able to keep 800% through the fiscal year. But that's what we have, at least at this juncture. And then the other just represents the HERF money. Our budget for tuition and fees, we budgeted almost $73.5 million. At this point, we're at $8.4 million, which is 11.3% increase over last year. Our tuition revenue, in district, out of district, and out of state are all up. Out of district represents the largest part, as it typically does, of the $209,000 that we're up. Our fee revenue is also up $257,000. The bulk of that is in the general fee, as you can see on the left. But also, again, our lab courses are up. Technology fees included in there, as well as the workforce. All the fees are up. When we look specifically at our housing and food service revenue compared to budgeted, we budgeted almost $11 million. And to date, we are at $1.1 million, which represents about 11%. Our auxiliary services revenue is up $255,000, a 19% increase. All of food service, bookstore, and parking are the largest part of those increases. Our total expenses, as I said earlier, are up $1.1 million. We do believe this 0.8, a good portion of that is timing. You do see the total salaries and benefits is also up by about $300,000. That represents the 5% that the board approved. Payroll expense is in line with what, as a allocation of each revenue dollar, is in line with what we've had in previous years. I wanted to point out another anomaly. You can see in this graph, in this chart, the bar chart in blue, significantly higher than any of the other ones that we've had, and that's a timing issue. We ended up making a payment in September, and this year, whereas last year, we had that payment in November. I thought it was interesting, if you look at the facilities rental, the bar charts are right next to that, and I think that is a very good reflection of what the college has done over the years, trying to get out of some of these rentals or reducing the rental expenses. And that's a pretty good reflection right there. Our expense comparison by category over $1 million, the 12%. Although this is a percentage, although the salaries look like the percentage is lower as a percentage of the overall expenses, but the dollars are up, as well as E&G expenses. Our operating expense, looking at the individual departments across the board, instruction and academic support. Physical plant, I think, is the biggest anomaly there, because I think a large part of that is timing that will end up going away. So our student cash and refunds in September is $15.9 million that we had. The largest part of that, of course, is the student financial aid that we reimbursed ourselves from the Department of Education. We issued a large number of refunds, $8.8 million, and our student payments that we received is almost $7 million. And then, of course, no, I don't have that here. Here it is. The other cash receipts in September, a little bit over $3 million. Interest is going to continue to go up. When we look at September of last year, we were having less than 0.5% is the amount of the rates that we were receiving. Now we're receiving them 3.5% to 4%. It's going to continue to go up. Our state appropriations, $2.6 million, is the largest part of that. And then a combination of grants, contracts, and taxes, $237,000. Our use of cash in September, $15.6 million. Accounts payable was a big portion of it. And that includes some of our payments for some of our book vendors for Barnes and Noble. Servitas, $1.3 million. Construction still there, $2.7 million. And then payroll, it's about close to what we've had in the past, 5.5. So overall, a summary, we received, for the month of September, we received $15.9 million from students, another $3 million from other sources. We ended up using $15.6 million in cash, which left us a net increase in cash for the month of September of $3.2 million. We've done something to take advantage of the rates that are out there. It's reflected in that last bar on the bottom. We did take some of the money out of the operating bank, but we also took some money out of the pools. Even though the pools have gone up, they're not close to comparison in terms of what we can get from a CD investment. So we took $6 million out of the pool and we invested in some CDs, as well as a little bit of money out of the bank. Our unrestricted cash and cash equivalents is $135 million at the end of September. Last year, I think it was a little bit higher, $137 million last year. So not too much difference. Stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone have any questions?
I have just one because I didn't, I know that we're moving a lot of things into CDs and that's a great use. But I can't tell for sure if this is page 13 or page 8. It says both at the bottom. In the little number, it's 8 and this is page 13. But we have a $5 balance in the construction and restricted fund investments. But last year it was over 7 million. So that's all been spent?
It's all been spent. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we, at this juncture, all of our bond money is gone. So now when we did this at the end of last year, it didn't just end in August, but at the end of last year, we started using our unrestricted portion. So we had, you may not remember, but we had a significant amount of money that we were using internal sources to pay for the Rellis campus. We borrowed a good portion of it, but that went first. And then we started using our money too. And there's still some more payments that will continue to be made. You saw $2 million in construction. There'll be a little bit more as we close it out, but we're using our internal sources.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you so much, Mr. Cervantes.
Thank you.
We will move on to item C in the reports, report on redistricting of the Board of Trustees precincts. I believe Mr. Schubert's going to take that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Hensley, fellow board members. We've got a presentation on redistricting. This is as a result of the 2020 U.S. Census data that has come out. And so you're going to hear from our outside attorney, Sid Falk, who's the expert on this. I'm going to turn it over to him here in a second. But this is an opportunity to discuss those precincts, some of the changes that have occurred. And ultimately, if everything goes as we had planned, we'll have an action item at the November meeting to officially adopt those plans and maps based on the discussion today. So I'll hand it over to Sid Falk and he can run us through the process.
Good morning. My name is Sid Falk. I'm with the Austin law firm Bickerstaff Heath Delgado Acosta. And one of our privileges is to do redistricting all over the state after every census and then rest for 9 years. Not really. I want to talk to you today about redistricting. It has been your custom and practice for many years to adopt the 4 commissioner precincts of Washington County after it has redistricted. Typically, counties do it first. And so I guess the question comes up, why do you need to know anything beyond that? And the answer is, because you're all educators, you want to know what goes on. But more important, you have an independent duty as the board who adopts a redistricting plan to be sure that that plan follows all the applicable law. And so I want to talk to you this morning very briefly, summarize the applicable law and principles that go into redistricting, take a quick look at the current state of your trustee districts, and then show you what the county adopted. And presumably, if you continue the practice of adopting the county commissioner precincts, since you're both countywide, that will be the plan that you ultimately adopt. So I hope it goes quickly. So what did I do wrong? Okay. All right. There are 4 basic principles that guide redistricting. The most important one, and they're all federal law principles, I should say. The most important one, and the one that actually drives redistricting, is the so-called one person, one vote, or equal population principle. And I'll come back to each of these in turn. While we balance that population, we need to be cognizant of the requirements of the Voting Rights Act, in particular Section 2, which is the non-discrimination section that forbids discrimination against protected minority groups. While we are thinking about race and ethnicity in our redistricting, we also need to be aware of a line of cases that originated with the U.S. Supreme Court case in 1993 called Shaw versus Reno, which limits the degree to which racial considerations can dominate your redistricting. And finally, Voting Rights Act Section 5, which used to require preclearance, has a useful standard, the standard of review that DOJ used when they were examining redistricting plans, that will help us spot potential Section 2 issues. So what is the one person, one vote standard? This is the thing that drives your need to redistrict. The U.S. Constitution has been interpreted by the courts, 14th Amendment, to require that single member districts, single systems with single member legislative districts have to have approximately equal population. So after every census, we look at your existing districts and ask whether they are approximately equal or not. The courts over many years have evolved a standard that says, in general, your most populous and your least populous trustee districts can't be more than 10% apart in population. So we look at ideal districts, which is a fancy way of saying, take your total population and divide it by the number of districts, 4. And if every one of your trustee districts had exactly equal population, it would be that ideal population. That's the target. You don't have to be perfect, however. You have that 10% leeway. And of course, lawyers have touched this, so it's not as simple as I just said. Here's an example of how we actually calculate that deviation and how courts have viewed it. This is a hypothetical with 4 districts. The population is fortunately exactly 40,000 people. And so if you divide by the 4 districts, you get a total ideal population for each district, a target population of 10,000. District A in this hypothetical has 11,000 people. So that's 1,000 more than the target size, than the ideal size. And that's 10% of the ideal size. So the deviation's measured as a percentage departure from the ideal size. So District A has 10% overpopulation. By the same token, if we look at District D in this hypothetical, it has 8,000 people, which is 2,000 less than the ideal size, or 20%. deviation from that ideal size, underpopulated. We look at the most populated and the least populated and disregarding the minus sign, add those two numbers together. This hypothetical produces a total deviation from top to bottom of 30%, which is bigger than the 10% that's allowed typically by the courts. And so this district has to redistrict. A little bit of an aside, the Census Bureau, in addition to taking head counts of everybody and all kinds of statistical studies, defines what's called census geography for the entire country. In particular, they divide the entire country into what are called census blocks. And the reason census blocks are important is that they are the smallest unit of area for which population and demographic data are reported. In a city, a census block typically looks a whole lot like, and usually is, a city block. If you get onto suburban areas or the country where population is usually not as dense, and perhaps the roads and so on are not as nice and rectangular and not as plentiful, census blocks can look larger and more irregular. But again, the important point is they are the units for which demographic and headcount data are reported. What kind of data do we have? We have access to the total headcount data, which is total population, reported at each census block. We have, in addition, voting age population, which is everybody in that total count that's over 18. In addition, for each of those categories, the census takes data on a variety of races and ethnicities and reports that data also at the census block. So there's a wealth of data to look at. Census blocks are important in small communities because they are typically the units that you use for your building blocks. Which population do you use and for what purpose? Total population is typically the data that are used to do the population balancing that you have to do to get your top to bottom districts within 10% of each other. If you have voting rights issues, discrimination questions, other kinds of questions that may come up, you use voting age population. And that's the reason that both of those are important. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act I've mentioned is the anti-discrimination section. And it says that you cannot unjustifiably discriminate against a protected minority group. There are two primary ways that redistricting efforts can violate Section 2. They're not the only ways, and there are all kinds of other ways to violate Section 2 outside the context of redistricting. But the two ways that we need to pay particular attention to is to avoid cracking or packing. Cracking is also sometimes called fracturing, and it's the practice of taking a concentration of minority population and breaking it into pieces to minimize its overall influence. And so imagine that you could draw a majority African-American district, but instead you break the African-American population and spread it out among 2 or 3 districts so that no one of them is a majority district. That can be cracking or fracturing and is to be avoided. The opposite of that practice is packing. So let us suppose that you had a majority, that you had a concentration of minority population that was sufficient to draw 2 minority districts, but you packed a whole bunch of the minority population into 1 district so that you can't produce a second minority majority district. That is packing and typically is to be avoided. Sometimes things that look like cracking or packing are actually a result of the distribution of the population and the fact that you have to balance the population among your districts sometimes drives things that can look like packing or fracturing, and you just need to be cognizant of them. The 14th Amendment has been interpreted by the U.S. Supreme Court to also require that racial considerations not be elevated to be the predominant consideration in drawing a district. It's obvious that if you're going to pay attention to Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, you have to look at race when you redraw your districts. But there is such a thing as going too far and paying too much attention to race. And I could try to explain it in words, but a picture really does the better job. These are some actual districts in the Houston area. The upper map shows an effort by the Texas legislature to create in the red district a majority Hispanic district in the Houston area. And the very, very light green area that surrounds it was intended to be a majority Hispanic district. And you can see the drawing went out and a lot of gerrymandering to grab all the African-American and Hispanic population that they could collect to put into those two districts respectively. These were challenged in court, and the court said, no, this goes too far. This is too dominant a consideration of race. You don't need to go this far. The limit is called narrow tailoring by the courts. And it basically says when you identify a problem, you do the minimum amount necessary to fix the problem. The legislature got a second chance to draw and didn't. So the court drew the districts down in the lower right. And in this case, the red district was still a Hispanic majority district, and the green district was still an African-American majority district, slightly weaker in both of those populations than the gerrymandered districts that the legislature had drawn, but they still managed to create minority districts. Those drawn by the court are an example of what does pass muster. And you can see they eliminated almost all of the real gerrymandering. Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which is still on the books, and I say used to require pre-clearance or pre-approval of a new districting plan or any other change you made to voting practices or standards before you could use them. And there are a couple of ways to pre-clear things. Typically what people did was get an administrative pre-clearance through the Department of Justice. You filed a big application with a whole bunch of information about your existing plan and why you're doing all the new districts and so on, and a whole history of your elections. And we filed one for the city of Houston once that was almost 40 boxes of material. In 2013, in a case called Shelby County versus Holder, the Supreme Court said Section 5 no longer applies. Well, actually, they didn't do that. Section 4 of the Act is the act that lists the criteria for deciding who gets to comply with Section 5. They're called covered jurisdictions. And it was actually Section 4 that the Supreme Court examined and found wanting. So Section 5 is still on the books, but it doesn't apply to anybody. Congress has not fixed the problem. There's a second piece of Section 5 that is still useful to us, even though pre-clearance is no longer required. When DOJ used to examine applications for pre-clearance, one of the things they looked at with respect to minority voting strength was whether or not there was so-called retrogression. Fancy lawyer way of saying you look at the before and after and ask whether the after improves minority positions for voting power or reduces them. And if the effect of your new plan is adversely to weaken minority voting power in a general sense, you have retrogressed. And that can be a flag, it can be a clue that you have got a Section 2 discrimination problem. Not always true. Sometimes retrogression is unavoidable because the task is to balance population. And sometimes in doing that, if you have, for instance, an underpopulated African-American district surrounded by overpopulated districts that are predominantly Anglo, you have to move people into the underpopulated district, you may actually reduce the relative strength of African-American voting in that district unavoidably. So the question that retrogression raises is as a flag, and then the next question you ask is whether you could have avoided the retrogression or not. A little bit about process. There's not going to be much, assuming that you continue your practice of adopting and using the Washington County Commissioner precincts. You're getting a presentation today, which we call the initial assessment, a little background on the law and so on. And as Mr. Schubert said, if your intention is to go ahead and continue your practice of using the Commissioner precincts as the basis for your trustee districts, you are in a position in your November meeting to adopt that redistricting plan that the county has already adopted. So let's look at your existing district data. We did not have actual data from your prior redistricting, in part because we didn't do it, and nobody saved all of the appropriate digital files. But I talked to the county, and they looked at their prior commissioner precincts before they redistricted last year. And this was the situation for them, and hence for you. Their District 1, Precinct 1, compared to the ideal size of the population at the time in 2011, had a deviation of about minus 5.5%, underpopulated by about 5.5%. By the same token, Precinct 3 was overpopulated. That's the most overpopulated of their precincts. It was at 4.62%. You add those numbers together, and boy, the county was lucky. You look at the very bottom left of the slide, you will see that the overall deviation for the prior commissioner precincts was 10.1%. Bigger than the 10% limit that the courts recognized as balancing the population, so they had to redistrict over a silly 0.1%. They did so and produced a balanced plan that looks like this. These are the new commissioner precincts, and if you continue your practice of adopting those precincts as your trustee districts, they will be your new trustee districts. And here are the data. Got some individual maps. But here's the data that matters. This is a table showing total population for each of the 4 precincts, the ideal size in the third column with the 2020 census data, and the actual 2020 census data head count in each of those resulting commissioner precincts. And if you look down at the bottom left, you will see the overall deviation for the county's new plan is at 3.13%, which is well within the 10% that they're required to achieve. And you can see each of the individual precincts has a very small deviation from the ideal size. The similar data, but for voting age population, just shows the distribution of minority strength in the county. These maps, this map is a look on a census block by census block basis at the African-American voting strength, population strength in each census block in the county. And there's a scale in the lower left, you see, given the percentage of African-American percentage of the total population in that census block gets a color. And if there is a substantial amount, majority of African-American population, you get a very dark color in that census block. You can see that the African-American population is reasonably well distributed across all of the precincts and not dominantly in one. So probably wouldn't expect to produce an African-American majority precinct. Similar map for the Hispanic distribution of population. And again, you can see in the county, there's not a whole lot of Hispanic population, and it's not concentrated in a small geographic area. It's spread out across the county. So again, you're probably not looking at the possibility of being able to draw a majority Hispanic precinct. These are more detailed data showing a bigger degree of breakdown of the ethnicity population data, very similar to the two charts I showed you earlier. So that's the basis for redistricting. And a couple of other things that you need to be conscious of, and you will need, or at least want to consider adopting as part of your redistricting adoption order. The plan effective date. Almost everybody would shrug and say, well, it's effective when we adopt the plan. Not necessarily. The effective date is the date your lines actually change and the new lines become effective. You have a choice. You can, of course, make them effective on the date you adopt the plan, or you could wait until people take office in the new term and have them only be effective then, so that the people are assuming office in the new districts. Either way you do it, I should point out, the new plan that you adopt will be the plan that is used for the election, both from a voter standpoint and for candidate sign-up standpoint. Texas law is clear on that, but you do have the ability not to change the lines. Not so much important for you, but for example, the county has constables and JPs. And there is often an advantage for a county, for example, to wait until the new JP term begins or the new constable term begins before they change those constable lines or JP lines, because there are jurisdictional issues. And they may want to wait and do it when the new officer takes office. It is typically less confusing for everybody involved, candidates who want to sign up for a run from a given area, voters who need clarity about which area they're going to vote from and who they're going to be able to vote for, to simply pick an effective date that is upon adoption. And that's what most jurisdictions do. But you do have the ability to pick a date at either end of the spectrum or any point in between. More important to you, I think, is this consideration. Texas Education Code, section 11.052H, which applies to community colleges through chapter 130 of the Education Code, requires that all trustees run at the next election following a redistricting, except the next section, which is 11.053, permits a trustees board to adopt an option that lets you finish your existing terms and keep existing stagger, which obviates the need for everybody to run at the very next election following a redistricting. And if you adopt that option under 11.053, only those whose terms are completed are going to be completed will be the ones running at the next election. In other words, you keep the existing term staggers. And so that's typically something that you'll want to do, but it's important to note that you must expressly do that. You must adopt that option, and we can do that as part of your redistricting plan adoption order. But you just need to be aware you need to do it if you want to maintain the existing stagger and let people finish terms. Okay. And that's all I have this morning. Are there questions? So you're all able to pass a test, right?
I guess the biggest question that I would have for this board is, based on what you've seen, does the existing map meet all the qualifications? And if this board approved it and voted for it, would we be doing so in good judgment?
We have, of course, in order to produce these, got the so-called shape files, which is the digital file that has the boundaries in it, from the county for their new adopted plan, and have looked at that. You've seen the charts and tables, and we are satisfied that it clearly clearly meets the one person, one vote, 10% requirement, and we are comfortable that you do not have Voting Rights Act problems. So I think the answer is yes, the county adopted a viable legal plan. And if your choice is to continue your practice of using those those commissioner precincts as the basis for your trustee precincts, we think you will be adopting a legal plan.
Great, thank you so much.
Who, does anyone look at the maps to see if those there are only 4 of us that this applies to, but looks at those maps to see if some of those lines have moved, that 2 of us could actually be in the same precinct?
We did, and I think I am correct in saying it's not a problem.
Okay.
And if not, I'm not giving you my address.
Any other questions by the board? Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think that we will now move on to the consent item portion of the agenda. All items listed in this portion of the agenda are considered to be routine by the Board of Trustees and will be enacted upon one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless the trustees so request, in which event the item will be removed from consent and considered in discussion and possible action. Trustees receive agenda materials in advance of the meeting to prepare for the business to be conducted. Item A is the approval of the minutes for the September 20th, 22 regular meeting, and item B is the acceptance of follow-up procedures report for the FY 2021 audits and the FY 2022 annual internal audit report related to the district-wide risk assessment effort. I would entertain a motion to approve.
I move adoption of the consent items.
Trustee Wells. Trustee Aylert, second. All in favor, please say aye. All opposed? I'm sorry. Benke. You know, I need to write everyone down just in order, so I don't. Okay, so we will now move on to item 6 in discussion and possible action items. The authorization for the administration to negotiate and execute a contract for engineering services and to seek competitive seal proposals for the expansion of parking lot K on the Blinn campus. Mr. Cervantes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. O'Malley is going to make this presentation.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, Dr. Hensley, members of the board, thank you for considering this agenda item this morning. The recommendation is that the board authorize the administration to negotiate and seek a contract with Kimley Horn for the engineering services and to seek competitive seal proposals for the expansion of parking lot K on the Brenham campus. Parking lot K is a lot that's adjacent to the former Solon's Hall and existing Coatney Center. That lot is a part of our master plan project to renovate and to expand. There's an existing 96 spaces there. This will give us a chance to grow the lot to approximately 140 and provide additional parking on campus for our SDI building and other library and other buildings in that vicinity. The estimated cost of this project is $1,260,000, and the schedule is such that we can complete this start this project next spring and be completed by next summer before at the end of this fiscal year. We received 5 qualification statements from engineering firms. The committee reviewed these and evaluated them, and our recommendation is to move forward with Kimley Horn for this project.
Anyone have any questions?
I have a question. It's primarily from an extension of some conversation we had at the last workshop dealing with the academic building and being able to, when we replace it, that we would have to be moving everything around, and there could be some issues in accommodating that. So in looking at that area and everything else, has there been any consideration about building that new academic building there to allow the old academic building to be utilized until it's built, and then convert that area at the academic building into parking to alleviate some of the concerns we had about that? So it's a question, we talked about modifications in the master plan and everything else. And so I just thought, because it appears that there would be sufficient area there to do that. But it's just a question I have based on our other conversations.
There's been no strong discussion on that. It has internally been discussed in the facilities area. That is something we could consider, although I think there are other and maybe better opportunities on campus as well if we were to move away from the academic building site. Also, I think the academic building site needs further discussion as well, based on the timing of that and the utilization of existing classrooms. So I think there's a much larger comprehensive plan we can bring to the board to consider in regards to the academic building and its location. And I don't think that the investment in this parking lot would be a detriment to what our future plans for academic building would be.
Okay.
Good question. Any other thoughts or questions? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve this particular action item. Trustee Krausen. Trustee Ehlert on the second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is going to be the authorization for the administration to close the Blinn Sealy campus, terminate the lease of the current facility, and negotiate and execute necessary agreements to partner with Sealy ISD to offer in-person courses at Sealy ISD facilities. Mr. Schubert?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Hensley, fellow trustees. Wanted to follow up on some conversations. We've had some ongoing discussions related to the Sealy campus, most recently at our board workshop last Tuesday, a week ago today. And we had a proposal that we wanted to present to you as some discussions we've been having, some initial discussions with Sealy ISD. And we wanted to discuss this with you and figure out next steps and how we're going to go from here. Just so you know, the end result of this plan would be that we would change locations in Sealy, continue our operations in Sealy out of a Sealy ISD facility. So we would continue our operations, not only our current dual credit operations, but also other college courses to the community that we're now doing at the Sealy campus location. We would relocate those to a Sealy ISD facility. Now, we have had initial discussions with Sealy ISD on this. We're working on that process, and there's lots of things that has to be worked out, but we have approached Sealy ISD for initial discussions to look at the structure of a proposed partnership there. As you're aware, and SACS COC, our accrediting body, drives a lot of this. Anytime you're moving a campus or changing a campus or adding a location, the SACS COC guidelines and principles drive that process. And so in our discussions, initial discussions with Sealy, as I said, those are initial discussions about a partnership. We're still looking at what facility options they have. Of course, our preferred location is the high school because we're already approved by SACS to provide over 50% of a program at the high school. So that would be the most logical, obviously, location. Once again, we're still in the initial stages of this. And what we wanted to do was have a discussion with you, the board, before we get too far down this road. We're at the very start. I've had conversations with Dr. Hallmark from Sealy. The chancellors had conversations. So we're right at the beginning here. But before we got any further, we wanted to bring the board in and get your authorization and your thoughts on how we move forward. As I said, the SACS process is dependent on what facility we would use. So there is one SACS process if we use the high school. If we were to use another Sealy ISD facility, that would be a separate SACS process, depending on what we choose there. Either way, we've heard clear message from the board that we are not wanting to reside in our current Sealy facility for lots of different reasons that we've discussed. And so part of this process would be that lease comes up for expiration August 31st of 2023. And part of the discussion and part of the authorization we're looking for today is official authority to terminate that lease and give the appropriate notice to the landlord that we would be vacating that lease at the end of the term, August 31st, 2023. The other item that we're looking for today is the ability to negotiate and execute any necessary agreements with Sealy ISD in order to get that facility that we would work with Sealy ISD and have the agreements we would need to do that. So once again, there's several processes going on here, but just to summarize, and happy to answer any questions, in summary, we're looking for three things today. The first is the authorization to initiate the appropriate SACS COC process for this change, including up to and including the closure of the Sealy campus. We're also looking for the authority to terminate the current lease at the Sealy facility, Sealy campus facility, and finally to negotiate and execute any necessary agreements with Sealy ISD based on the discussions that we would have going forward with them with that authority. So, Mr. Chairman, happy to stand for any questions.
I do have a question. So is there a guarantee that there is space currently, and is there space to grow?
Yes. Sealy ISD has, in our initial discussions are fully behind that. They have offered up any of their facilities, and I had, like I said, another conversation this morning with their superintendent, and they said there is space and we can accommodate that.
Is that space for a teach-out program, or is that space to continue programs as they are?
Both. The teach-out plan would only be involved if you were to actually permanently close and move to the high school. So let's just dive into that. Here's the SACS processes. There are two potential processes. If you want to move from the current Sealy campus to the high school, since that's already an approved site, you have to first close the current campus, that official process through SACS, and then go and teach at the Sealy High School. So that would involve a teach-out plan, like we talked about at the board workshop, but that would also include ongoing operations outside of the teach-out plan. So if you were to go from your current location to Sealy High School, you would have a teach-out plan with Sealy ISD facilities, and you would have ongoing operations, basically taking what we're doing at the Sealy campus and moving it to the high school. So that's the first option. If you were to have a separate Sealy ISD facility, not the high school, because we don't have any other approved sites at Sealy. If you were to move your current campus from where it is to, say, the middle school, I'm just coming up with a facility, non-high school facility, there is a SACS process that's called relocation. And that is simply saying, SACS, we're at the Sealy campus right now. We're moving from building A, the Sealy campus, and we're going to move to another location, which would be a different Sealy ISD facility that would not be the high school. That is simply a relocation. What that does not entail a teach-out plan, because you're taking your operations from one place and moving it to another place that's not already an approved site. That is just a relocation. But if you're going to go from our current Sealy campus to the Sealy High School, which is already an approved site, that does require closure of the current Sealy campus, the teach-out plan that we've talked about, and then moving your operations to that high school.
I have another question. How does that impact the current faculty that is working there?
Great question. So the teach-out plan, if we were to do the move to the high school or to move to any other facility, it would be a redeployment of those employees. So you have a staff member, Lisa Caton, who is here, our executive dean for Sealy, and I've talked with her about this. And if either way that we do this, she will just relocate. And we've also talked with this about Sealy ISD. She would relocate her location to the new space, whether that's the high school or wherever else. She would move there and do that. The professors, the faculty, as far as I understand, there's only one faculty member that permanently resides at the Sealy campus. All of the others teach at other locations. They just cycle through their courses to teach it at Sealy. So what they would do is they would just change, instead of going and teaching at our current Sealy campus, they would teach at whatever Sealy ISD facility we discuss. So they would all be redeployed and still doing the same thing they're doing, just at a different location.
Question or comment. I'd like to amend this to say close or relocate, because I think it's very important that we make it clear to the people of Sealy that we are not closing and moving out of Sealy completely. We are just looking for another location.
And Dr. Cross, and I agree with you, and that's why that's why I mentioned the amended motion would be to authorize to initiate the appropriate SAC COC process up to and including closure if that is what's required based on the facility of the ISD that we would use. I completely agree.
So we are limiting that to only the CISD property and would not consider any other properties that may come up. Is that what you're saying?
So in the future, are you saying let's just theoretically, we're approached in the future and say, hey, here's a great location that's not a Sealy ISD facility. We could always pursue that. It would be opening a new campus, another location. But in order to have the continuity of operations that we're looking at, we were looking at Sealy ISD facilities because we could just plug and play and say, okay, we're going to have operations at our current Sealy campus. Now we have those at Sealy ISD. That's a very smooth transition. If we were to find another location in the future, whether it be raw land or a already built building, you could always make the decision to move to that other location, but that would be a separate SAC COC process of opening a new campus.
But only if Sealy ISD does not agree to provide us with adequate facilities. If I understood you correctly, you would say we would automatically go to closure. Is that what you were saying or not?
It depends on what facility at Sealy we would use. So if we were to relocate to, let's say, a middle school, let's just come up with that option. That would be a relocation because that middle school is not an approved site.
Why wouldn't it be the same for any non-Sealy ISD piece of property?
It would be. It would be.
I think that's what you're trying to
let me
say.
expand it. Thank you, Dr. Crossman. Let me expand it. If you are not moving to Sealy High School, all of it would be a relocation process. Because Sealy High School is already an approved site, SACS will not allow you to simply relocate there. You have to close your current campus and then you move to that facility. So if you were to move to any other Sealy ISD facility besides the high school or any other location in Sealy, that would be a relocation under SACS.
But wouldn't you have to secure the relocation, have SACS approve that before you initiate plans to close the current one?
Yes, but this is where SACS gets involved. If a relocation is not a closure under SACS, it's just moving from location A to location B. So if we were to relocate under SACS, which would mean any non-Sealy High School facility or any other facility, there would not be a closure defined by SACS of the current campus. It would just be a shifting of your operations from this location to that location. So no teach out plan. None of those things are involved in a relocation under SACS. The only time that's involved is if you would go to the high school, and that would then require a closure of the campus under SACS and then moving to the high school since that's already an approved site.
But I have on here, it's saying a teach out plan for the kids to finish out their stuff. Are those courses still going to be continued after that? Or is this, okay, then that's a little bit of like, okay, I get it. We finish up for the kids, but then those things are still going to be available. So we're not reducing at all the amount of offerings in Sealy. We're just wanting to get out of the outlet mall.
Thank you, Trustee Benke, for that clarification. In other words, if we were to move this process and go to a Sealy ISD facility, once we worked out those details with Sealy ISD, we would be admitting new students to the Sealy campus. It would just be at the Sealy ISD facility. So we would take those operations that we currently have at Sealy, move them to whatever Sealy ISD facility we agree upon, and then students would register just like they do now with Apply Texas and all those sort of things. We would still have Blinn Sealy on the Apply Texas application. It would just be at the Sealy ISD facility, and those students could register just like they do now and take those courses there as opposed to where they're taking them currently.
But intended to be the same course offerings that we currently offer.
That is correct.
So the teach out would go through the end of August and then start up in Sealy ISD next fall?
Yeah, so the teach out plan is a longer process and they would run concurrently. So the teach out plan has to be a plan by SACS that's approved by SACS that says for your current students, we are going to, here's your plan for how you're going to allow them and get them to complete their degree or program. It's a lot simpler for us because we're not closing altogether. We have other locations online. We would work with Sealy ISD to do teach-out plan there. They could attend at any other Brenham or Blinn campus. And so that teach-out plan, here's your plan for this set of students, the current students, how you're going to provide them an ability to complete their program with the least disruption possible for them. And we feel it'd be minimal disruption because either going to take them online, which most of the courses at Sealy are online already, or you go to a Sealy ISD facility to take that teach-out plan or another Blinn campus. So that's your first. But at the same time, once we work out with Sealy ISD, we would be allowing new students to register. It would just be taking those courses at a Sealy ISD facility instead of our current facility.
Steve Wells.
Vice Chancellor Schubert, I think the biggest issue is the concept of closing the campus. And as someone who's not knowledgeable of Saxon and other process, it sounds like that Blinn is abandoning its academic presence in that community.
Absolutely.
I think that the wording, particularly as you read it in KWHI and abandon other places, we're not closing the campus. Technically, we're relocating to another site to still provide the same academic opportunity to focus Sealy. And the reason why I'm going backwards in that is that Trustee Mosier was very clear that it has implications not just for Sealy ISD, but for the leadership in that community overall. He was encouraging us to reach out to local government, to reach out to chambers, to make certain that they're clear that ultimately our good intentions to continue to provide access and affordable education to that community is still remaining. We're just leaving the building. So I think that that's what we got to communicate real clearly, because when people hear we're closing Sealy, it has a very negative connotation to it.
Point well taken, Trustee Wells. Part of the challenge we face is with SACs, we have to use certain language and certain items to meet their guidelines. But to the public, closure means something very different to the public than it does under a SACs process. You're exactly right. Our marketing department and our press releases and the working with all the different local entities would be very clear worded that we are continuing operations. It will just be at a separate location. We have to internally do the SACs process and use those language, but externally, yes, that would be made very clear. This is a continuing operations, not an end of our operations in Sealy.
Douglas.
One of the things is why can't we work with Sealy ID and Sealy ISD, excuse me, and know what our arrangement is going to be with them so we can make a more informed decision of where we're going with this. Why do we have to put all of this other stuff as part of that? I mean, you could end up not knowing, but if Sealy ISD wants the same lease rate as we're currently paying or something of that nature, why make a change at this point in time? I mean, I don't think, at least I don't have enough information about what the new agreement with Sealy may be. I just don't know why we might not be able to get more of that information to solidify that before proceeding with anything at this point.
So, Mr. Schubert, what is the deadline for us? I mean, primarily to get out of the lease, we've got a timing issue. What is the deadline for us making that notification, and would that allow you guys to do some more work, bring this back to the board on what we actually are going to do before we have to actually make that notification?
So to answer Trustee Bohart's first question, we as administration did not want to get in front of you on this. We wanted to bring this for you at the very start of this. We have initial discussions, got a green light from Sealy that they are willing and to accommodate us. But before we went too far down, we didn't want to get in front of you. So there are two processes we need to track here. From the lease standpoint, we have to give 60 days notice. So the end of June is when we give 60 days notice. But I will clarify, if you're going to, depending on the SACs process you choose, there's a lot of runway that's needed. You've heard the administration say, if you're going to close the campus, that's a year-long process. So depending on when we say we're doing X, that's what starts that process. And so the longer we go with this, the longer out the lead time gets. The whole goal of this was to, according to what we heard from the board, was an intent not to renew the current lease and find another location. So if we don't start the process, the odds of us being able to conclude our operations and go through the SACS process to transition before August are probably not very high. That's the timing that we're looking at.
Does the lease expire on that date? Is there a month-to-month extension after that, or is it a hard stop?
It's a hard stop, but of course, we've done this before and renegotiated additional terms and those sort of things. That's always an option. We can always go to the landlord and work on additional terms if that's what the board would like us to do with the current Sealy lease. That is an option.
So you're saying the process, if we made a decision in November, not now, but in November, December, then it would be 12 months.
Yes, that is the.
So we might need to add on to the lease in
Well,
order to make it work. Is that what you're saying?
we feel comfortable that with the teach out plan options we have and having the ability to move those teach out plan courses to Sealy ISD facility, that is not a major disruption to the student. So we feel that we could get that plan approved from SACS on the teach out plan with this much lead time. However, the longer we go with less lead time, the less likely SACS is going to say, okay, you're only giving X months of notice, whereas now we're giving them quite a bit of notice, because we're not, like I said, we're not closing all options. They still have local options that they could do. So it's a fine line with SACS. How much lead time are you giving them? How much notice are you giving them? We feel that we could do that now, but like I said, the further we wait, it gets up in the air if SACS would approve that teach out plan.
I keep hearing teach out plan so much in this, which always brings me back to that's closure.
Mm-hmm.
Where am I missing that?
If under SACS, let's keep that clear. Under SACS, if you're going to move from the Sealy campus to Sealy High School, SACS requires you to close the current location, because you can't move from one approved site to another approved site without first closing under SACS that current location. So to the public, to SACS, that's a closure. And that's why I have to use that term, because that is a term defined by SACS. In reality, it's a continuum of operations just at a simple new location, but under SACS, that is defined as a closure.
So there's no real getting around what we have to say in this board meeting as to how we're going to have to move forward on the issue. Bigger question is what our intent is and how we phrase that, to the public.
That's correct.
I just want to say, I would agree with Douglas. I think we need to find out more about this Sealy partnership, and I would propose we just, on this authorization, just use that last part of it to negotiate and execute necessary agreements to partner with Sealy ISD. I don't think we have to make that decision today to do a closeout or relocation, because we don't know. And I think we need to get more information. I think you guys need to go out and do some more digging with the ISD and other locations.
Do you need formal action from this board to be authorized to negotiate those items with Sealy ISD?
Yes, we do.
Then I'm hearing a motion.
Yeah, I make the motion then that we negotiate and execute necessary agreements to partner with Sealy ISD to offer in-person courses at Sealy ISD facilities.
That will work for our further discussions and negotiations with Sealy ISD. And as soon as, if that's the board's wish, as soon as we are able to get additional information, hopefully we can get that ironed out in time to do that teach out plan or whatever is required from SACS based on those results.
That's a question, Dennis, what you're asking, and I'm wondering about is then could we get more specific information about what it is that we are negotiating with Sealy ISD between now and November or whenever we want to?
Yes, we'll keep the board apprised as to the development of those negotiations and what those terms actually are, of course.
Okay.
Trustees, we've already made arrangements to take a team from Blinn. We'll need to look at IT connections, banner hookup, all kinds of accessibility issues, equipment and appropriate facilities for the classrooms that we need for the courses that we want to continue at Sealy. as Leighton said, we don't want to go too far down that road without bringing you along with this. So a couple of clear takeaways. For SACs, we are using certain terminology that is required by SACs. For the public and for the marketing and for the communication within Sealy, Blinn is not going to cease operations in Sealy. We are going to continue operations in Sealy within likely Sealy ISD, preferably at Sealy High School, but possibly at another location within Sealy ISD. Which location we choose determines the specific language that is required by SACs. Regardless of which location we use and what language we use with SACs, the intent and the marketing communication is that the lease facility we are currently in will cease operations there, and we will end that lease. And we will move our classes to be continued for dual credit and open to the community at another location within Sealy ISD. And likely we'll be able to bring back some further clarity on this to you in November because we have a team going out there ahead of time. Thank you. Oh, and I do want to add one more thing. We have furniture and equipment that we would likely transfer, so those logistics we would be working out. Hookups, important telephone communications and the like still has to be resolved. And we have computers that would likely be transferred also. And I have publicly stated and will state again that we will not terminate any faculty or staff. We will find another location for them, likely still in Sealy, but possibly elsewhere.
Any additional discussion? So there is a motion on the floor.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, any discussion before we vote? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay,
Thank you, trustees.
thank you. Okay, we will now move into the executive session portion of our agenda in accordance with 551.071, 551.072, and 551.074. Would you guys like a break?
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break.